The smell of burned bacon reached Katherine Newman's nose 3 seconds before the shout started, and she knew without looking that her sister's husband had finally made good on his threats. Katherine stood in the back alley of the Miller's boarding house in Centralia, Missouri, her hands still dripping with wash water, when she heard glass breaking from the second-floor window. Her sister Clara's scream cut through the humid afternoon air of July 1878, followed by the heavy thud of boots on wooden stairs. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the weathered boards of the building, knowing that if Marcus found her first, Clara might have time to escape. But Clara appeared at the back door, her lip already swelling, clutching a carpetbag that Katherine recognized as the one their mother had carried west from Virginia 15 years ago. "Run," Clara gasped, shoving the bag into Katherine's arms. "He is coming for you next. He said you knew too much about his dealings, about the money he stole from the railroad company. Katherine, please, just run." Before Katherine could protest or pull her sister along, Marcus Delaney filled the doorway, his face purple with rage and whiskey. Clara turned back, placing herself between her husband and her younger sister, giving Katherine the seconds she needed to bolt down the alley toward Main Street. Behind her, she heard Clara's voice, strong and steady despite the fear, telling Marcus that Katherine had gone toward the river. Katherine's eyes burned with tears as she ran, knowing her sister was buying her time with whatever consequences Marcus would deal out, knowing she could not go back without putting them both in greater danger. The carpetbag bounced against her legs as she ran through the afternoon crowds, past the general store and the bank, past the saloon where Marcus conducted his crooked business with railroad officials, who looked the other way while he skimmed profits. Katherine had kept the books for Clara's small dressmaking business, and she had seen the ledgers Marcus carelessly left open, had recognized the discrepancies and understood what they meant. She had been fool enough to mention it to Clara just last week, thinking her sister deserved to know what kind of man she had married. Now Clara was paying for Katherine's honesty, and Katherine was running for her life with nothing but the clothes on her back, $7 in the carpetbag, and her mother's silver hairbrush. The train station offered no refuge because Marcus had friends there, men who would send word the moment she tried to buy a ticket. The stagecoach would not leave until morning, and she could not hide in Centralia for that long. Marcus knew every shopkeeper, every hotel owner, every person who might give her shelter. He had spent 5 years building his network of corruption and influence, and Katherine had no illusions about her chances if she stayed within the town limits. She found herself at the edge of town where the road split, one path leading south toward the river settlements, the other heading west into ranch country. Her lungs burned and her side ached, but she kept moving, choosing the western road because it led away from the water, away from where Clara had told Marcus she was heading. The July sun beat down mercilessly, and within an hour, Katherine's dress was soaked with sweat and dust coated her throat. She had no horse, no water, no plan beyond putting as much distance as possible between herself and Marcus Delaney. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Katherine stumbled on a rut in the road and went down hard on her knees. The carpetbag flew from her grip, spilling its meager contents across the packed dirt. She knelt there, gathering her few possessions with shaking hands, when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her freeze. A rider was coming from the west, silhouetted against the setting sun, and Katherine's first instinct was to run into the brush alongside the road. But her legs would not cooperate, trembling with exhaustion and fear, and she could only crouch there like a rabbit waiting for the hawk to strike. The rider slowed as he approached, and Katherine could make out more details. A tall man on a rangy sorrel horse, wearing a dusty hat and carrying himself with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this landscape. He reined in his horse several yards away, perhaps sensing her fear, and removed his hat to reveal dark hair and a weathered face that might have been 30 years old or 40. She could not tell in the fading light. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that somehow managed to sound both cautious and concerned. "You look like you could use some help." Katherine's throat was too dry to answer immediately. She clutched her carpetbag to her chest and tried to stand, but her legs buckled. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, but he did not approach her. Instead, he pulled a canteen from his saddle and held it out at arm's length. "Water," he said simply. "I am not going to hurt you. Name is Kieran Fletcher. I work at the Double F Ranch about 5 miles west of here. You are running from something, and I am guessing you have good reason, but you will not make it much farther without water." Katherine stared at him, trying to assess the threat he posed, but her desperation won out over her caution. She reached for the canteen with trembling hands and drank deeply, the lukewarm water tasting better than anything she had ever known. When she finally lowered the canteen, Kieran was watching her with something like pity in his hazel eyes. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I apologize for the trouble. I will be on my way now." "Where exactly are you headed?" Kieran asked, still keeping his distance. "Because the next town is 20 miles west and you will not reach it before dark. Nothing out here but ranch land and a whole lot of empty." Katherine's mind raced through possibilities, trying to calculate whether this stranger represented help or danger. He did not know Marcus, did not seem to recognize her, and something in his steady gaze suggested he was not the type to force himself on a woman alone. She made a decision born of desperation and intuition. "I need work," she said, lifting her chin. "I can cook, clean, keep books, so I am not particular about the work, just need a place that is not Centralia." Kieran's eyebrows rose slightly. "Running from the law, no," Katherine said firmly. "Running from someone who thinks he is above it." Something shifted in Kieran's expression, a hardening around his eyes that suggested he understood exactly what she meant. He nodded slowly, then glanced back down the road toward Centralia before looking at her again. "The Double F needs a cook," he said. "Our last one quit 3 days ago after the ranch hands put a snake in the sugar bin as a joke. The men have been trying to cook for themselves, and it has been going about as well as you would expect. The food is terrible, and 2 of them nearly set the bunkhouse on fire yesterday. The owner, Frank Foster, is getting desperate enough that he would probably hire anyone who can boil water without burning it." "I can do better than boil water," Katherine said, her voice steadier now. "I can make biscuits, roasts, stews, pies. I kept house for my sister and cooked for her boarders for 3 years." Kieran studied her for a long moment, and Katherine had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through to her fear and desperation. But when he spoke, his tone was matter of fact. "The ranch is not fancy, but it is solid work and Frank is a fair man. You would have your own room in the main house, decent wages, and the men know to be respectful or answer to Frank. But I have got to be straight with you. If you bring trouble to the ranch, if someone is going to come looking for you with violence in mind, Frank has a right to know what he is taking on." Katherine swallowed hard, appreciating his honesty even as it forced her to reveal more than she wanted. "My sister's husband is a thief and a brute. I saw ledgers I should not have seen, evidence of him stealing from the railroad. He was afraid I would report him, and he has a temper when he has been drinking. My sister helped me get away, but he has influence in Centralia. He will look for me there, but I do not think he will have reason to search ranch land west of town. He is a town man, not comfortable out in open country. Kieran absorbed this information with a slight nod. Frank does not have much love for town officials or crooked railroad men. If this fellow does come around making trouble, he will find the double F does not take kindly to men who threaten women. But you should know that ranch work is not easy. The cook feeds 20 men 3 times a day during peak season, and right now we are in the middle of a cattle drive preparation. The hours are long and the work is hard. Hard work does not scare me, Katherine said, meeting his eyes. Staying in Centralia scares me. Going hungry on this road scares me. Honest work and a safe place to sleep sound like heaven right now. A hint of something that might have been a smile touched Kieran's mouth. All right then. Let us get you to the ranch before full dark. Can you ride, or do you need to ride double? Katherine had ridden as a girl but had not been on a horse in years. Still, riding double would mean pressing close to this stranger, and despite his apparent kindness, she was not ready for that. I can ride. Kieran whistled, and a second horse appeared from the brush where it had apparently been grazing, a sturdy paint mare with gentle eyes. This is Daisy. She was my brother's horse before he went east to work in St. Louis. She is as sweet-tempered as they come. You will be safe on her. He helped Katherine secure her carpet bag to the saddle, his touch impersonal and efficient, then gave her a leg up onto Daisy's back. The mare stood perfectly still, as if sensing her rider's nervousness. Kieran mounted his own horse and set a moderate pace westward, checking over his shoulder regularly to make sure Katherine was managing. As they rode through the gathering dusk, Kieran pointed out landmarks. The creek that marked the eastern boundary of the Double F land. The hill where lightning had struck an old oak, leaving it split, but still standing. The line of cottonwoods that marked the approach to the ranch buildings. He talked in a steady, calm voice that Katherine found oddly soothing after the terror of the afternoon. He did not pry into her circumstances or ask uncomfortable questions. Instead, he told her about the ranch, about Frank Foster who had built the operation from nothing after serving in the Union Army, about the 20 hands who worked the cattle and horses, about the rhythms of ranch life. Frank is a widower, Kieran said as the ranch buildings came into view against the darkening sky. His wife Mary died about 5 years back from pneumonia. He has a daughter, Louisa, who is married and living in Kansas City now. The main house has more rooms than Frank needs, which is why the cook always stays there instead of in the bunkhouse. You will have privacy and a door that locks. Frank insists on that for any woman working at the ranch. The reassurance was clearly deliberate, and Katherine felt some of her tension ease. They rode into the ranch yard, past a large barn and several corrals, toward a substantial 2-story house with a wide porch. Lamplight glowed in the windows, and Katherine could see a figure moving inside. Kieran dismounted and came to help Katherine down from Daisy, his hands steady at her waist as she slid from the saddle. Her legs nearly buckled again after the unaccustomed ride, but she managed to stay upright. "Wait here," Kieran said, then strode up the porch steps and knocked on the door frame before entering. Katherine heard low voices from inside. Then Kieran reappeared with an older man who had silver hair and the erect bearing of a military man despite his lined face. Frank Foster looked Katherine over with shrewd blue eyes that missed nothing. From her disheveled hair to her dusty dress to the carpet bag, she clutched like a lifeline. But his expression was not unkind, and when he spoke, his voice held a gruff gentleness. "Kieran tells me you can cook and you need a job. That right?" "Yes, sir," Katherine said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I am a good cook and a hard worker. I will not cause trouble or shirk my duties." "You got references?" Katherine's heart sank. "No, sir. I left Centralia in a hurry." but I can prove my skills if you give me a chance. Let me cook breakfast tomorrow. If the men do not like my food, I will leave without complaint." Frank studied her for another long moment, then glanced at Kieran, who gave a slight nod. Something passed between the two men, some communication Katherine could not quite read, and then Frank sighed. "All right, Miss Newman, Katherine Newman, Miss Newman, you can stay the night and we will see how breakfast goes. Kieran, show her to the spare room off the kitchen. Miss Newman, I expect meals at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. You will have help with supplies and heavy lifting, but the planning and cooking is all on you. We pay $30 a month plus room and board. If you work out, we can talk about you staying on permanent. If not, I will pay you for the day and help you get to the next town." "Fair, more than fair," Katherine said, relief flooding through her so intensely she felt dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. Foster." Frank nodded and disappeared back into the house. Kieran picked up Katherine's carpetbag and gestured for her to follow him. They entered through the front door into a large main room with comfortable furniture and walls decorated with simple paintings of ranch scenes. Kieran led her through to a spacious kitchen with a massive cast iron stove, long work tables, and a pantry that appeared well stocked. A door off the kitchen opened to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out toward the barn. "The water pump is just outside the back door," Kieran said, setting her bag on the bed. "There is soap and towels in the washstand. The door has a bolt on the inside." Frank meant what he said about privacy. "No one will bother you here." "Thank you," Katherine said, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "For everything. For the water on the road, for bringing me here, for vouching for me with Mr. Foster." Kieran shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You looked like you needed help, and I have a sister back in Tennessee. I would hope someone would do the same for her if she was in trouble." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Newman, whatever you are running from, you are safe here. Frank has a reputation in these parts. People know not to cross him or cause trouble on his land. Get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch." After he left, Katherine bolted the door and sank onto the bed, her hands still shaking with residual fear and relief. She thought of Clara, hoped her sister was safe, hoped Marcus's rage had burned itself out quickly. She wanted to send word, to let Clara know she had found refuge, but any communication would risk revealing her location. For now, she could only trust that Clara understood why Katherine had run, why she could not come back. Katherine unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the wardrobe and placing her mother's hairbrush on the washstand like a talisman. She washed her face and hands in the basin, the cool water soothing her road-burned skin, then lay down on the bed without bothering to undress. The mattress was thin but clean. The pillow smelled of fresh air and sunshine, and for the first time in hours, Katherine felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and men's voices in the yard. For a moment, she forgot where she was and panic surged through her. But then memory returned along with the realization that she had work to do. She dressed quickly in her least dusty dress, brushed her brown hair back into a simple knot, and ventured into the kitchen as gray light filtered through the windows. The kitchen was empty and blessedly quiet. Katherine lit the lamps, then began exploring the pantry and cold storage, taking inventory of what was available. She found flour, lard, buttermilk, eggs, bacon, potatoes, onions, dried beans, canned tomatoes, coffee, and a reasonable array of spices. Enough to make a substantial breakfast that would impress men who had been cooking for themselves. She started coffee first. knowing Cowboys would want it strong and plentiful, then mixed biscuit dough while the oven heated. Bacon went into a large skillet, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, and while it cooked, she peeled and diced potatoes for frying. She cracked 24 eggs into a bowl, added cream and pepper, and scrambled them in the bacon fat. The biscuits went into the oven, golden and perfect, and she made gravy from the drippings, thick and savory. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, the kitchen table and the long dining table in the adjacent room were laden with platters of food and pots of coffee. Katherine heard boots on the porch. Then Frank Foster entered, followed by a stream of ranch hands who stopped dead at the sight and smell of real cooking. Kieran was among them, his eyes meeting Katherine's across the room with something like approval. "Gentlemen," Frank said, his voice carrying authority, "this is Miss Newman, our new cook. You will treat her with respect at all times, and if I hear otherwise, you will answer to me. Now sit down and eat before it gets cold." The men needed no further encouragement. They filled their plates with an enthusiasm that would have been comical if Katherine had not been so nervous about their verdict. She stood by the stove, ostensibly ready to refill platters but really watching their faces for reactions. The first man to taste the biscuits closed his eyes with an expression of pure bliss. Another declared the gravy the best he had ever had outside of his mother's kitchen. A younger cowboy with red hair tried to eat 6 eggs at once and nearly choked, earning laughs and backslaps from his companions. Kieran ate steadily and without comment, but when he brought his empty plate to the kitchen, he paused beside Katherine. "You said you could cook," he said quietly. "You did not mention you could cook like this. I think you just guaranteed yourself permanent employment." "It is just breakfast," Katherine said, but she could not quite suppress her smile. "It is the best meal these men have had in weeks," Kieran replied. "Trust me, you are not going anywhere now. They would riot if Frank tried to let you go." His words proved prophetic. As the men filed out to start their workday, every one of them thanked Katherine with genuine gratitude. Frank himself pulled her aside in the kitchen. "Miss Newman, that was exceptional. The men are already asking what is for dinner, which is more enthusiasm than I have seen for food in a long time. I would like to offer you the position permanently if you are willing. Same terms as I mentioned last night, $30 a month plus room and board. We can draw up proper papers if you want them in writing." "I accept, Mr. Foster," Katherine said, relief and pride warming her chest. "And thank you for giving me the chance." "Thank Kieran," Frank said with a slight smile. "He is the one who brought you here. That man has good instincts about people. Now, I do not want to pry into your business, but Kieran mentioned you left Centralia in a hurry. If you need any kind of protection or legal help, I have connections. I meant what I told the men. You are under my roof and my protection now." Tears stung Katherine's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "I am grateful, sir. I do not think there will be trouble, but if there is, I will not bring it to your door without warning." "See that you do not," Frank said, but his tone was not harsh. "This is a good ranch with good men. I keep it that way by not tolerating troublemakers or bullies. Anyone who tries to harm you will find out quickly that I do not take kindly to such behavior." Over the following days, Katherine settled into the rhythms of ranch life with surprising ease. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, spent her mid-mornings preparing dinner, her afternoons cooking it and starting supper preparations, and her evenings cleaning up and planning the next day's meals. It was exhausting work, but honest and satisfying in a way her life in Centralia had never been. Here, she was valued for her skills, treated with respect, and allowed to simply exist without fear. The ranch hands warmed to her quickly once they realized she could take their good-natured teasing without offense. They started bringing her fresh-picked berries when they found them, or wild turkey they had shot, or catfish from the creek. She, in turn, learned their preferences and favorite dishes, making special birthday meals and extra desserts when she could spare the supplies. The kitchen became a warm, welcoming space that smelled of bread and coffee and simmering stews, a heart to the ranch that had been missing during the weeks without a proper cook. But it was Kieran who intrigued Katherine most. He was Frank's foreman, second in command of the entire operation, and she quickly learned that he had earned that position through competence and unshakable reliability. He was always the first man in for breakfast, and often the last one to finish work at night. He handled disputes among the hands with fairness, worked harder than anyone else, and had an easy way with the horses that bordered on magical. He was also, Katherine noticed, unfailingly polite to her without ever crossing into familiarity. In those first weeks, their interactions were brief and businesslike. Kieran would bring her supply lists or relay messages from Frank. Sometimes he helped carry heavy pots or bags of flour that were too awkward for her to manage alone. He thanked her for meals like all the other men, but his thanks always seemed more considered, as if he truly saw the work she put in rather than just enjoying the results. It was 3 weeks into her employment when Katherine first glimpsed something deeper beneath Kieran's reserved exterior. She was in the pantry taking inventory when she heard voices in the kitchen. Kieran and a younger hand named Samuel discussing a problem with one of the newer horses. "I am telling you, someone has been cruel to that gelding," Kieran was saying, his voice tight with anger. "He flinches from anyone holding a rope, and he has scars on his flanks that look like whip marks. When I find out who did that to him, I am going to have words." "Maybe he came that way," Samuel suggested. "That does not make it right," Kieran said firmly. "An animal depends on us to treat it decently. Breaking a horse's spirit through cruelty just makes a dangerous animal and marks you as a coward. Real horsemanship is about building trust, not inspiring fear." Katherine found herself nodding in agreement, then realized with a start that Kieran could have been talking about people just as easily as horses. Building trust, not inspiring fear. That was exactly what he had done with her on that road from Centralia, keeping his distance, offering help without demands, giving her choices instead of orders. She wondered if he approached everything in his life with that same patient respect, and found herself hoping the answer was yes. August rolled into September, bringing cooler nights and the organized chaos of preparing for the autumn cattle drive. Extra hands were hired for the drive itself, which meant Katherine was cooking for 30 men instead of 20. The work was brutal, sunrise to long after sunset, but she managed with stubborn determination. Kieran took to checking on her in the evenings after the dinner dishes were done, ostensibly to go over the next day's plans, but often lingering to help dry dishes, or sharpen her knives, or simply ensure she was not collapsing from exhaustion. "You do not have to do this," Katherine told him one evening as he dried the last of the serving platters. "I am quite capable of managing the kitchen myself." "I know you are," Kieran said, hanging the platter on its hook with careful precision. "But capable does not mean you should have to do everything alone. Frank would skin me alive if I let you work yourself sick." "Is that the only reason you help?" Katherine asked, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. Kieran's hand stilled on the towel, and he turned to look at her with those steady hazel eyes. "No," he said after a moment, "that is not the only reason." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Katherine had been trying not to acknowledge for weeks. She was attracted to this quiet, competent man who treated her like an equal, who looked at her like she mattered beyond her ability to feed the ranch hands. But attraction was dangerous, led to complications, and she was still technically a fugitive from Centralia, still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Marcus to somehow discover where she had gone. "Kieran," she began, not sure what she wanted to say, but he held up a hand. "I am not asking for anything," he said gently. "I just want you to know that I admire you, the way you landed here with nothing and built yourself a place through sheer determination, the way you treat the men with patience even when they are being idiots, the way you get up every morning before dawn and do hard work without complaint. You are stronger than you give yourself credit for, Katherine Newman." No one had spoken to her that way in longer than she could remember. Clara had loved her but always treated her like someone who needed protection. Marcus had seen her as an inconvenient witness to his crimes. The people of Centralia had barely seen her at all, just Clara's quiet younger sister who kept to the background. But Kieran saw her, really saw her, and valued what he saw. The realization made her throat tight and her eyes burn. "Thank you," she managed to say. "That means more than you know." Kieran nodded, a small smile touching his mouth, then headed for the door. He paused on the threshold, looking back at her in the lamplight. "Get some rest, Katherine. Tomorrow is going to be another long day." After he left, Katherine sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her heart racing. She was in dangerous territory now, developing feelings for a man when her life was still unsettled, when danger might still be lurking in Centralia, when she had nothing to offer but a fugitive's uncertainty. But her heart did not seem to care about practicalities. It had already begun the long, terrifying fall toward Kieran Fletcher, and Katherine was not sure she had the strength to stop it even if she wanted to. The cattle drive departed on a cool morning in mid-September, taking most of the hands and Kieran with it. They would be gone 3 weeks, driving the herd to the railhead in Sedalia, where the cattle would be loaded onto trains bound for eastern markets. Frank stayed behind with a skeleton crew to maintain the ranch, and Katherine found the kitchen oddly quiet with only 8 men to feed instead of 30. She used the lighter workload to deep clean the kitchen, reorganize the pantry, and experiment with preserving the last of the summer vegetables. Frank proved to be pleasant company during meals, sharing stories of his years building the ranch and carefully not asking about Katherine's past. She learned that he had left a farm in Pennsylvania to join the Union Army at the outbreak of the war, that he had fought in some of the worst battles, and emerged with a medal he never displayed and wounds he never discussed. After the war, he had come west with his young wife Mary, determined to build something lasting in the new territories. The ranch was that legacy, carved from hard work and harder choices. Mary wanted children, Frank said one evening over coffee. "We only managed one, Louisa, and Mary nearly died bringing her into the world. The doctor said there could be no more. Mary never complained, but I always knew she felt like she had failed somehow, even though Louisa was the light of both our lives. When Mary died, it felt like the light went out of this place. Louisa was only 17, still needed her mother, and I was no good at the soft things Mary had handled so well. The girl ended up raising herself while I threw myself into ranch work. Children are resilient," Katherine said softly. "I am sure Louisa understood you were grieving." "Maybe," Frank said, staring into his coffee. "But understanding and feeling understood are different things. I have tried to do better by her, but the damage was done. She went to Kansas City as soon as she could, married a banker, and now we exchange letters twice a year. Polite letters, you understand, nothing of substance." He looked up at Katherine with sad eyes. "I am telling you this because I see Kieran watching you the way I used to watch Mary. Like you are something precious he is afraid to break, and I am thinking maybe you watch him the same way when you think no one is looking." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but did not deny it. "I am not in a position to offer anything to anyone, Mr. Foster. I have no past I can share, no certainty about my future. It would not be fair to Kieran to encourage something when I might have to leave at any moment." "Life is never fair or certain," Frank said. "I learned that when a Confederate bullet took out half my company in the space of 5 minutes. When Mary got sick with what should have been a simple cold and was dead in a week. You can spend your whole life waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances, and die having never really lived at all. Kieran is the best man I know, the kind who comes along once in a lifetime if you are lucky. If you care for him and he cares for you, do not waste that because you are afraid of what might happen." His words haunted Katherine through the following days. She tried to imagine a future here, not just as the ranch cook, but as someone who belonged, who had roots and connections and possibilities. She tried to imagine Kieran coming home in the evenings to her, sharing quiet conversations and gentle touches, building something real together. The image was so appealing it terrified her, because wanting something that much meant it could be taken away, and loss was a pain Katherine had experienced too often already. The morning the cattle drive was due back, Katherine woke with nervous energy that sent her into a frenzy of cooking. She made a feast worthy of celebration. Roasted chickens, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, green beans with bacon, apple pies, and a chocolate cake that took half the morning to prepare. By the time she heard the shouts and lowing of cattle in the distance, the kitchen smelled like heaven, and the dining table groaned under the weight of food. The men thundered into the yard covered in 3 weeks of trail dust, whooping and laughing with the satisfaction of a successful drive. Katherine watched from the kitchen window as they unsaddled horses and slapped each other on the back, looking for one particular tall figure with dark hair. When she spotted Kieran, her heart did something complicated in her chest. He looked exhausted but pleased, talking with Frank and gesturing toward the now empty holding pens where the cattle had been gathered before the drive. The men cleaned up at the pump and barn, taking turns with buckets of water and harsh lye soap, then stampeded into the house when Frank rang the dinner bell. Their reaction to Katherine's feast was everything she could have hoped for: gratitude and delight and exclamations of how much they had missed real cooking. But Katherine barely heard them. Her eyes kept finding Kieran across the room, and every time they did, he was looking back at her with an expression that made her breath catch. After the meal, after the dishes were done and the kitchen was finally quiet, Katherine found Kieran sitting on the back porch steps, staring up at the stars. She hesitated, then joined him, leaving a careful foot of space between them. "Welcome back," she said. "The drive went well." "Got top price for the cattle and did not lose a single head," Kieran said. "Frank is pleased, which means bonuses for everyone. But I am going to tell you something true, Katherine. The whole 3 weeks, all I could think about was getting back here, getting back to you." Katherine's breath stopped. "Kieran." "I know," he said, finally turning to look at her. "I know you are not sure about your situation. I know you might have to leave. I know you have not told me everything about what you are running from, and I am not asking you to. But I need you to know how I feel, because I have never been good at playing games or hiding what is in my heart. I am falling in love with you, Katherine. Maybe already fallen. And if there is any chance you feel the same way, I need to know, because I will wait for you. I will protect you. I will stand between you and whatever danger is chasing you. But I need to know if I am doing it as your friend or as something more." Tears blurred Katherine's vision. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake, that she should protect them both by keeping distance between them. But Frank's words echoed in her mind. "You can spend your whole life waiting for the perfect moment and die having never really lived at all." "I am scared," she whispered. "I am scared of what I feel for you because I have so little to offer. I am scared my past will catch up and hurt you. I am scared of wanting this too much." "Then be scared with me," Kieran said, reaching out to take her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but steady. "Because I am scared too. I am scared I will lose you before I ever really have you. I am scared I am not good enough, that you will realize you could do better than a cowboy who smells like horses and has nothing but a foreman's salary. But I would rather be scared and honest than safe and alone." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, dark against pale in the moonlight, and felt something inside her shift and settle. She had spent months running from danger, weeks hiding from her feelings, years trying to be invisible and safe. But safety without connection was just another kind of loneliness, and she was so tired of being alone. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible, but I cannot help it. You are kind and strong, and you see me as a person, not just as someone to be protected or used. When you are gone, the whole ranch feels emptier. When you are here, I feel like I can breathe properly again." Kieran made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. Katherine went willingly, pressing her face against his shoulder and breathing in the scent of him, soap and leather and something uniquely Kieran. He held her carefully, as if she were something infinitely precious, one hand cradling her head and the other spread across her back. "I will keep you safe," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever you are running from, whoever is looking for you, they will have to go through me first. I promise you that, Katherine." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the quiet night, until the chill air drove them inside. At Katherine's door, Kieran kissed her for the first time, a gentle press of lips that held more emotion than Katherine had thought a kiss could contain. It was a promise and a question and a beginning, and when he pulled back, his eyes were shining in the lamplight. "Good night, Katherine," he said softly. "Good night, Kieran," she replied, already missing his warmth. She went to bed with her heart full and her mind easier than it had been in months. Whatever came next, whatever dangers still lurked in her past, at least she would not face them alone. She had Kieran now, had his strength and his promise and his love. It felt like enough to face anything. But life, as Frank had noted, was never certain. 2 weeks after the cattle drive ended, a stranger rode into the ranch asking questions. He was a weasel-faced man in city clothes, clearly uncomfortable on his horse, and he claimed to be looking for a woman who had run away from her employer in Centralia. He described Katherine with enough accuracy that she felt her blood turn to ice when Frank came to warn her. "He is in the yard right now," Frank said, his expression grim. "I told him we had no runaway women here, but he is insistent. Says there is a reward for information about her whereabouts. I can send him on his way, but if he saw you through the window or if anyone in town mentions the new cook, he will be back with more men." Katherine's hands trembled as she untied her apron. "I should leave. If he brings trouble here because of me, I could never forgive myself." "The hell you will leave," Kieran said from the doorway. Katherine had not heard him enter, but he looked furious, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "We are not letting you run again, especially not because some hired thug is asking questions." "Kieran is right," Frank said. "You are part of this ranch now. We protect our own. But we need to know what we are dealing with, Katherine. Who sent this man, and what will he do if he finds you?" Katherine took a shaky breath and told them everything. About Clara's marriage to Marcus Delaney, about discovering his embezzlement from the railroad, about his drunken rage and Clara's sacrifice to let Katherine escape. She told them about Marcus's connections throughout Centralia, his reputation for violence, his ability to make problems disappear when it suited him. "He will not let this go," she finished. "He knows I could destroy him if I testified about what I saw in those ledgers. He will keep looking until he finds me, and he will not care who gets hurt in the process." Frank and Kieran exchanged a long look, then Frank nodded slowly. "Then we make sure he cannot hurt you. I have friends in the territorial marshal's office. Men who actually care about the law instead of bribes and influence. We get you to them, you testify about what you saw, and Marcus Delaney goes to prison where he belongs. Once he is locked up, you are safe." "And what about Clara?" Katherine asked, hating the quaver in her voice. "If Marcus is arrested, if he thinks she helped me testify against him." "We will get your sister out too," Kieran said firmly. "We will bring her here or send her to stay with my sister in Tennessee. Whatever keeps her safe. But Katherine, running will not solve this. That man out there is proof that Marcus will not stop looking. You need to face this head-on with the law on your side." Katherine wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could keep running, but she knew they were right. Marcus would never stop hunting her, and every day she stayed here put Frank and Kieran and all the ranch hands in potential danger. The only way out was through, testifying against Marcus and trusting that justice would prevail. "All right," she said, squaring her shoulders. "What do we do?" Frank's plan was simple, but required careful timing. He would send word to his contact in the marshal's office, a man named William Hardy who had served with Frank during the war and owed him several favors. Hardy would arrange for Katherine to give her testimony in St. Louis, far enough from Centralia that Marcus's influence would not reach. In the meantime, Katherine would stay at the ranch under constant guard, and the hired thug would be sent away with misinformation about a woman matching Katherine's description, who had been seen heading south toward Arkansas. Samuel, the young ranch hand with a gift for storytelling, approached the man in the yard and spun an elaborate tale about a woman who had passed through the week before, trying to get to family in Little Rock. He described her with just enough accuracy to seem credible but added details that did not match Katherine, a missing tooth and a scar above her left eyebrow. The man paid Samuel $5 for the information and rode south that same afternoon. "That will buy us some time," Frank said, watching the man disappear down the road. "But not much. When he does not find anything in Arkansas, he will be back. We need to move fast." Marshal Hardy arrived 3 days later, a serious man with iron gray hair and a marshal's star pinned to his vest. He listened to Katherine's story with careful attention, taking notes and asking clarifying questions about dates and amounts she had seen in Marcus's ledgers. When she finished, he sat back with a thoughtful expression. "This is enough to open an investigation," he said. "The railroad has been auditing its accounts in Missouri after several reports of missing funds. If you can identify specific entries and time frames, they can cross-reference with their records. But you understand what you are risking, Miss Newman. If Marcus Delaney is as connected as you say, testifying against him could put a target on your back for the rest of your life." "It is already there," Katherine said quietly. "At least this way, he might be behind bars instead of hunting me." "What about her sister?" Kieran asked. He had barely left Katherine's side since the hired thug appeared, a constant protective presence that Katherine found both comforting and heartrending. "Can you get Clara away from Delaney before he is arrested?" Hardy nodded. "I can have deputies bring her into protective custody as soon as we have Miss Newman's formal testimony. We will tell Delaney she is being questioned as a witness, which will be true enough. Once she is safe, we move on him." "Then let us do this," Katherine said, reaching for Kieran's hand. "The sooner it is done, the sooner I can stop looking over my shoulder." The journey to St. Louis took 2 days by train. Kieran insisted on accompanying Katherine despite Marshal Hardy's assurance that he could provide adequate protection. Frank supported Kieran's decision, giving him leave from the ranch and a stern order to bring Katherine back safely. Katherine was grateful for Kieran's presence, his steady calm helping to settle her frayed nerves as the train carried them toward an uncertain future. In St. Louis, they stayed in a hotel near the courthouse, in separate rooms with a deputy stationed in the hallway. Katherine spent a sleepless night rehearsing her testimony, trying to remember every detail of those damning ledgers, every conversation she had overheard, every piece of evidence that might help convict Marcus. Kieran came to her room at dawn, having bribed the deputy with breakfast, and found her pacing by the window. "You are going to wear a hole in the floor," he said gently, closing the door behind him. "I keep thinking I will forget something important," Katherine said, pressing her hands against her temples. "What if my testimony is not enough? What if they do not believe me? What if Marcus finds a way to make me look like a liar?" Kieran crossed to her and took her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "You are the most honest person I know. Anyone who hears you speak will recognize the truth. And you are not doing this alone, Katherine. I will be there in that courthouse. Marshal Hardy will be there. The railroad auditors will be there with their records. Marcus Delaney built his house of cards on lies and corruption, and today it comes tumbling down." His confidence steadied her, as it always did. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence, and when it was time to leave for the courthouse, she walked with her head high and her spine straight. The testimony took hours. Katherine sat in a wooden chair facing a panel of railroad officials, federal marshals, and a territorial judge, and told them everything. She described her sister's marriage to Marcus, her own work keeping household accounts, the day she had seen Marcus's railroad ledgers lying open on Clara's table. She recounted the entries that had caught her attention, shipments that were recorded as delivered but never logged into inventory, payments made to shell companies that existed only on paper, inflated costs for materials that suggested kickbacks. She named the dates she remembered, the amounts she had noted, the patterns she had recognized. The railroad's auditors nodded along with her testimony, conferring in whispers and checking their own records. When Katherine finished, the head auditor stood and confirmed that every detail she had provided matched discrepancies they had discovered in their investigation. Marcus Delaney had embezzled an estimated $15,000 over the past 3 years, a fortune that would send him to federal prison for decades. "Miss Newman," the judge said when the auditors finished their confirmation, "your testimony has been invaluable to this investigation. Based on what we have heard today, I am issuing a warrant for Marcus Delaney's arrest on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and assault. Marshal Hardy will execute that warrant immediately, and your sister will be placed in protective custody until such time as Mr. Delaney is safely incarcerated. You have done a brave thing coming forward, and I want to assure you that every resource of this court will be dedicated to ensuring your safety going forward." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor. I just want my sister safe and to be able to live my life without fear." "You will have both," the judge promised. Marshal Hardy arrested Marcus 3 days later in Centralia, catching him at his office at the railroad depot. According to the report Hardy sent to St. Louis, Marcus had resisted arrest and taken a swing at one of the deputies, earning himself additional charges of assaulting a federal officer. Clara was found at the boarding house with a black eye and a broken wrist, injuries she admitted Marcus had inflicted the night before in a drunken rage. The evidence of his violence against Clara added further weight to the charges against him, and the prosecutor assured Katherine that Marcus would be lucky to see freedom again before he was an old man. Clara was brought to St. Louis under guard, and the reunion between the sisters was tearful and desperate. They held each other in Katherine's hotel room while Kieran kept watch outside, giving them privacy for their grief and relief and recriminations. "I am so sorry," Clara kept saying, her voice muffled against Katherine's shoulder. "I should never have married him. I should have seen what he was. I should have protected you better." "You did protect me," Katherine insisted. "You gave me time to run. You took his rage so I could escape." "Clara, none of this is your fault. Marcus fooled everyone." Clara pulled back, touching Katherine's face with her good hand. "You look different. Stronger, maybe, or just happier. Tell me about where you have been." Katherine told her about the Double F Ranch, about Frank's gruff kindness and the good-natured ranch hands, and the satisfaction of cooking for people who appreciated her work. And she told Clara about Kieran, her voice softening as she described his quiet strength and patient courtship and the way he made her feel safe and valued. "You love him," Clara said, and it was not a question. "I do," Katherine admitted. "I know it is fast, and I know my situation has been complicated, but yes, I love him." "Then hold on to that," Clara said fiercely. "Hold on to him and do not let go. Real love is rare enough in this world. When you find it, you fight for it with everything you have." Clara ended up going to Tennessee to stay with Kieran's sister Sarah, who was married to a blacksmith and had 3 children under the age of 5. Sarah welcomed Clara with open arms, thrilled to have help with the children and company in a house that tended toward chaos. Letters from Tennessee arrived regularly at the ranch, Clara's handwriting growing steadier as her injuries healed, and her spirit recovered from years of Marcus's abuse. Marcus himself went to trial in November and was convicted on all charges. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison, and Katherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying since that terrible day in July. She was free now, truly free, to build the life she wanted without constantly looking over her shoulder. Back at the Double F Ranch, Katherine threw herself into her work with renewed energy and joy. The kitchen became her domain in a way it had not been before, when she was still half expecting to have to run at any moment. She ordered new equipment from the catalogs Frank provided, reorganized the entire pantry system, and started experimenting with recipes she had never dared try when her future was uncertain. The men benefited from her newfound confidence, enjoying dishes that ranged from traditional ranch fare to more adventurous meals Katherine had read about in her mother's old cookbook. But it was her relationship with Kieran that truly flourished in those months after the trial. They courted properly now, without the shadow of her past hanging over them, stealing moments together between her kitchen duties and his ranch work. Kieran brought her wildflowers from the prairie and helped her plant an herb garden behind the kitchen. Katherine mended his shirts and made his favorite apple pie whenever she could spare the ingredients. They took evening walks along the creek, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams and fears. On a cold evening in December, Kieran asked Katherine to marry him. They were sitting by the fire in the main house, Frank having tactfully retired early, and Kieran pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "It was my grandmother's," he said, holding the ring carefully. "She gave it to my mother, and my mother gave it to me before she died. She told me to give it to a woman who was worth the wearing of it, someone strong and kind and true. Katherine, you are all those things and more. You are the other half of my heart. Will you marry me?" Katherine's vision blurred with tears, but she was laughing as she nodded. "Yes. Yes, Kieran, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, deep and sweet and full of promise, and Katherine knew she had finally come home. They married on a bright January day in 1879, in the small church in Centralia that Katherine had once attended with Clara. Clara came from Tennessee for the wedding, her wrist fully healed and her eyes brighter than Katherine had seen them in years. Frank walked Katherine down the aisle, having gruffly asked for the honor the week before. The ranch hands filled the pews, scrubbed clean and wearing their best clothes, grinning like fools as Katherine and Kieran exchanged vows. Frank hosted the reception at the ranch, the main house packed with well-wishers, and the tables groaning under a feast that Katherine had spent a week preparing with help from Clara and several ranch wives. There was music and dancing and toasts that ranged from sweet to hilarious, and through it all, Kieran never let go of Katherine's hand, as if afraid she might disappear if he loosened his grip. When the celebration finally wound down and the last guests departed, Kieran carried Katherine over the threshold of the small house Frank had given them as a wedding present. It sat at the edge of the ranch property, close enough to the main house that Katherine could easily walk to the kitchen, but far enough to provide privacy. It was modest but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a cozy parlor, and a kitchen that Katherine had already claimed as her own domain for the meals she cooked just for Kieran. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a culmination of months of restraint and yearning. Kieran worshipped Katherine with his hands and mouth, murmuring endearments against her skin, taking his time to learn what made her gasp and sigh. Katherine gave herself to him completely, trusting him with her body as she already trusted him with her heart. When they finally came together, it felt inevitable and right, as if they had been moving toward this moment since that first meeting on the dusty road from Centralia. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the bedroom window, Katherine's head on Kieran's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. "I love you, Katherine Fletcher," Kieran murmured into her hair. Katherine smiled at her new name, at the reality of belonging to this man and him belonging to her. "I love you too, Kieran Fletcher. Thank you for saving me that day on the road." "You saved yourself," Kieran said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I just gave you a place to land. But I am grateful every day that I found you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Katherine tilted her head up to kiss him, slow and sweet, then settled back against his chest with a contented sigh. She thought of Clara, safe and healing in Tennessee. She thought of Marcus, rotting in a prison cell where he could hurt no one. She thought of Frank, gruff and kind, giving them this house and his blessing. And she thought of the ranch, her kitchen, the men she fed, and the work that gave her purpose and pride. She had come to the Double F Ranch running from danger, desperate for any shelter. But she had found so much more than safety. She had found a home, a family, and a love that would sustain her through whatever life brought next. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. Katherine continued to cook for the ranch hands, but now she did so from the main house kitchen during the day and returned to her own home with Kieran each evening. She loved that balance, the satisfaction of her work and the joy of building a life with her husband. Kieran thrived under Frank's mentorship, learning the business side of ranching in addition to the physical work, and Frank made no secret of his intention to eventually turn over management of the Double F to his foreman. "I am not getting any younger," Frank told them one evening over dinner. "And I do not have any children to pass this ranch to. Louisa has made it clear she has no interest in returning to ranch life, and I cannot blame her. But you too, you love this place like I do. When I am gone, I want to know the Double F is in good hands." "Frank, you are healthy as a horse," Kieran protested. "You have got decades left in you." Maybe, Frank allowed. But a man likes to have his affairs in order. I am having my lawyer draw up papers that will leave the ranch to you and Katherine when I pass. Consider it a very late wedding present." Katherine felt tears sting her eyes. "Frank, that is too generous. We could never repay you for something like that." "You repay me every day," Frank said gruffly. "You make this house feel like a home again. You remind me what it is like to have family around." "That is worth more than money, Katherine." In the spring, Katherine discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly, a missed monthly course followed by morning sickness that sent her running from the kitchen in the middle of preparing breakfast. Kieran found her retching behind the house and immediately wanted to fetch the doctor. But Katherine laughed through her nausea and told him what she suspected. The joy on his face was so pure and unguarded that Katherine fell in love with him all over again. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break, and she felt him trembling against her. "A baby," he whispered. "Katherine, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Kieran said, pulling back to look at her with shining eyes. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful beyond words. You are going to be such an amazing mother." The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Katherine had to adjust her kitchen duties as she grew larger, and the heat of the stove became oppressive. Frank hired a young woman from town to help with the heavier work, and the ranch hands treated Katherine like she was made of spun glass, jumping to help her with anything that required lifting or reaching. Kieran fussed over her constantly, bringing her cold water and footstools, and anything else he thought might make her comfortable. Clara came from Tennessee in October to help with the birth, bringing Kieran's sister Sarah and Sarah's youngest child. The house filled with women's voices and laughter, and Katherine found herself grateful for their presence as her time drew near. Giving birth was dangerous business even in the best circumstances, and having experienced women around her eased some of her anxiety. The baby came on a cold November night, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. The labor was long and painful, Katherine gripping Clara's hand on one side and Sarah's on the other while the doctor coached her through each contraction. Kieran paced the parlor with Frank, both men looking gray with worry, until finally a thin wail cut through the night. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, carrying a squirming, red-faced bundle into the parlor. "A healthy boy with a fine set of lungs." Kieran took his son with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny face with an expression of complete awe. When the doctor cleared him to see Katherine, he carried the baby to her carefully, as if transporting the most precious cargo in the world. Katherine was exhausted and sore, but the moment Kieran placed their son in her arms, everything else faded. The baby had Kieran's dark hair and Katherine's nose, and his eyes, still unfocused, seemed to look right into her soul. She traced a finger over his tiny hand, marveling at the perfect miniature fingers that immediately curled around hers. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "He is perfect," Kieran corrected, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Just like his mother. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son's face, Katherine knew exactly what felt right. "Frederick," she said. "After Frank. Frederick Kieran Fletcher." Kieran's eyes widened, then softened. "Frank is going to cry, you know. The old man is going to absolutely lose it." "Good," Katherine said, smiling tiredly. "He deserves to know how much he means to us." When they told Frank the next day, presenting him with his namesake, the older man did indeed tear up. He held little Frederick with the careful competence of someone who had once held his own daughter, and his voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. "You honor me more than you know," he said. "This boy is going to have a good life." He has got good parents and a good home, and he is going to grow up knowing he is loved. That is all any child really needs. Frederick proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing well. Katherine managed to balance motherhood and her cooking duties with Clara and Sarah's help, and by the time the other women returned to Tennessee after Christmas, she felt confident in her ability to handle both. Kieran was a devoted father, taking over Frederick's care in the evenings so Katherine could rest, walking the floor with him when he was fussy, changing nappies without complaint. The ranch hands were equally besotted with the baby, competing for chances to hold him and making elaborate wooden toys in the bunkhouse. Samuel whittled an entire barnyard of animals, each one perfect in miniature detail. Another hand, a quiet man named Thomas, made a cradle from polished oak that rocked on curved runners. Even the roughest cowboys went soft around Frederick, speaking in gentle tones and making silly faces to earn his toothless smiles. As winter melted into spring and Frederick grew from an infant to a bright-eyed baby who recognized his parents and laughed at their antics, Katherine felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. She had gone from running for her life to this: a loving husband, a healthy child, a home and work and community that valued her. Sometimes she thought about that desperate woman who had stumbled along a dusty road carrying everything she owned in a carpetbag, and she barely recognized her. Clara wrote regularly from Tennessee, her letters full of news about Kieran's nieces and nephews and her own growing friendship with Sarah. She had started helping in Sarah's husband's blacksmith shop, keeping the books and managing orders, and her letters radiated a peace and purpose that had been missing during her marriage to Marcus. When Katherine wrote back with news of Frederick and ranch life, she always included an invitation for Clara to visit or even move to Missouri if she wanted. But Clara seemed content in Tennessee, building a new life among people who did not know her sad history. Marcus remained in prison, a dark footnote to Katherine's past that she thought about less and less as time passed. She had heard through Marshal Hardy that he had tried to organize an appeal, but the evidence against him was too solid and his behavior in prison too poor. He would serve his full sentence, 20 years that would take him into old age, and Katherine felt no sympathy for him. He had brought his fate upon himself through cruelty and greed, and she refused to waste emotional energy on his suffering. When Frederick was a year old, they celebrated with a small party at the ranch. Katherine made a special cake, and Frederick smashed his chubby hands into it with gleeful abandon, smearing frosting across his face and hair. Kieran captured the moment with a new camera he had purchased, preserving Frederick's joy for posterity. Looking at her husband and son, both laughing, both hers, Katherine felt her heart might burst from happiness. That night, after Frederick was asleep in his cradle and they lay together in bed, Kieran pulled Katherine close and kissed her temple. "I was thinking," he said quietly, "what would you think about giving Frederick a brother or sister? Not right away, but maybe in another year or so." Katherine smiled against his chest. "I would like that. A full house, lots of children, noise and chaos and love." "Exactly what I was thinking," Kieran murmured. "I want to fill this house with family, Katherine. I want Frederick to grow up with siblings the way I did, always having someone to play with and fight with and learn from. I want to build something lasting here, a legacy that goes beyond the ranch." "We are already building it," Katherine said, tilting her head up to kiss him. "Every day, with every choice we make. This is our legacy, Kieran. This love we have, this family we are creating, it is already more than I ever dreamed possible." They made love then, slow and sweet, reaffirming the bond between them and already anticipating the children they would create together. Katherine felt cherished and safe in Kieran's arms, a feeling she had learned to trust over their years together. He had never given her reason to doubt his love or his commitment, had proven himself steady and true in every circumstance. The following years unfolded with the steady rhythm of ranch life, marked by seasons and cattle drives and the milestones of Frederick's growth. He took his first steps at 13 months, chasing after the barn cat. His first words were Mama and Dada, and then, much to Frank's delight, Frank. He grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's adventurous spirit and his mother's thoughtful nature, equally comfortable helping Kieran with ranch chores and keeping Katherine company in the kitchen. When Frederick was 2.5, Katherine gave birth to twin girls. The pregnancy had been harder than her first, her body struggling to accommodate 2 babies, and the birth was difficult enough that the doctor warned against having more children. But the moment Katherine held Margaret and Elizabeth, named after her mother and Kieran's mother, she felt the struggle had been worth it. The girls were tiny and perfect, with wispy blonde hair and their father's hazel eyes, and Frederick was enchanted with his new sisters. The house became gloriously chaotic with 3 small children. Kieran built an addition to give the girls their own room, and Katherine learned to manage cooking and motherhood with the help of the young woman Frank had hired and occasional assistance from ranch wives. Life was full and busy and exhausting and perfect. Frank, now in his late 60s, gradually stepped back from active ranch management and let Kieran take over completely. He spent his days playing with the children, teaching Frederick to ride a gentle old mare, and sitting on the porch watching the sunset with a contentment Katherine had never seen in him before. He told Katherine once that she and Kieran and the children had given him a second chance at family, had filled the holes left by Mary's death and Louis's absence. "I am a lucky man," he said, holding baby Elizabeth while Margaret dozed on his other knee. "I could have died a lonely old widower with nothing but the ranch to show for my life. Instead, I get to watch these little ones grow and know that the double F will be in good hands for generations. You gave me that, Katherine. You and Kieran and these babies." "You gave us everything first," Katherine said, her throat tight. "You gave me a job when I was desperate, a home when I was lost, a family when I had nothing. We are the lucky ones, Frank." Frank passed away peacefully in his sleep when the twins were 3 years old, a heart attack that took him quickly and without suffering. The entire community turned out for his funeral, testament to the respect he had earned over decades of fair dealing and honest work. Katherine and Kieran grieved deeply, feeling the loss of the man who had been father figure, friend, and mentor to them both. But they also celebrated his life, knowing he had died happy and surrounded by love. The ranch became fully theirs then, a responsibility they took seriously, and a legacy they were determined to honor. Kieran managed the business with the same combination of shrewdness and fairness that Frank had modeled, and the double F continued to thrive. Katherine expanded her role beyond cooking, keeping the ranch books with the same skill she had once used for Clara's dressmaking business, and found she had a head for numbers and business strategy. Frederick grew into a bright, capable boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranch work from the time he could sit a horse. The twins were more bookish, preferring to spend time with Katherine learning to read and cook. But they also loved the animals and could often be found in the barn playing with kittens or feeding carrots to the horses. Katherine watched her children grow with a mother's pride and an immigrant's gratitude, knowing how easily their lives could have gone differently. She thought sometimes about that day in Centralia when she had run with nothing but a carpet bag and fear. She thought about the choice she had made to trust a stranger on a dusty road, to accept help when she was desperate. That single decision had changed the trajectory of her entire life, had led her to Kieran and Frank and the double F, had given her safety and love, and a family that extended beyond blood. Clara visited when the children were old enough to appreciate their aunt, bringing stories of Tennessee and gifts she had made herself. She never remarried, claiming she was content with her independence and her work with Sarah's family. But Katherine suspected the wounds from Marcus ran deeper than Clara admitted. Still, her sister was happy in her own way, building a life defined by her choices rather than her past. And Katherine respected that. On Katherine and Kieran's 10th wedding anniversary, they stood together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the prairie. The children were asleep inside, Frederick dreaming of the horse Kieran had promised him for his birthday, and the twins curled together in their shared bed. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to hard work and careful stewardship. "You ever regret it?" Kieran asked quietly. "The way we started, all the fear and uncertainty. Do you ever wish things had been different?" Katherine leaned into her husband's side, his arm coming around her automatically. "Not for a second," she said honestly. "Every hard thing we went through brought us here. I would not change any of it because changing it might mean losing this. You, the children, the ranch, all of it. We earned this life, Kieran. We fought for it and worked for it and built it from nothing. That makes it precious." Kieran pressed a kiss to her hair. "I found you on that road, desperate and scared, and I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I had no idea I was finding my whole future. You are my heart, Katherine Fletcher. You and our children are everything to me." "And you are my safety and my home," Katherine replied, turning in his arms to look up at him. "You gave me both when I needed them most, and you have never stopped giving. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than today." They kissed in the fading light, a marriage kiss that held years of shared joy and struggle, that promised years more to come. When they finally pulled apart, Katherine looked out over the ranch again and felt a deep, abiding peace. She had come here running from danger, seeking any shelter that would have her. But she had found so much more than refuge. She had found purpose in her work, feeding the men who kept the ranch running. She had found family in Frank, who had given them everything. She had found home in the land itself, the rolling prairie and big sky that had seemed so foreign at first, and now felt like the only place she belonged. Most importantly, she had found love in Kieran, a quiet cowboy who had seen past her fear to the strength beneath, who had offered help without conditions, and had waited patiently for her heart to catch up with her need. He had kept his promise to protect her, had stood with her through every trial, and had built this beautiful life alongside her. The ranch had needed a cook fast, desperate for someone who could feed 20 men without burning down the kitchen. Katherine had needed safety faster, running from a man who would have destroyed her to protect his own secrets. But Kieran had given both, offering her work and shelter, and in the process, he had given her everything else too. Love and family, purpose and belonging, a future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky and Kieran's arms tightened around her, Katherine Newman Fletcher knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey had been hard and the beginning had been terrifying, but the destination was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. She was home, she was loved, and she was finally, completely safe. Not because walls protected her or laws constrained her enemies, but because she had found a man who chose her every day, who built their life together with the same careful dedication he brought to everything he did. The ranch might have needed a cook, and she might have needed safety, but they had given each other something far more valuable in the end. They had given each other a reason to build instead of just survive, to dream instead of just endure, to love instead of just exist. And that, Katherine thought as Kieran led her inside to their bed and their sleeping children and their shared future, was the greatest gift of all.